And I'm back with more coverage of the adaptation of the most subversive video game sequel of all time, The Last of Us Season 2. I wasn't sure if I was going to cover the last 2 episodes because I figured the plot would slow down after Joel's death, because that's pretty much what happened in the video game. And while that still turned out to be mostly true, there was something that happened in episode 4 that made me think it would be worth talking about. And I'm sure all of you already know exactly what that is, the worst lesbian love scene in arguably any piece of fiction. And another reason I decided to make this video is because I'm not going to be making an Expedition 33 review, sorry to disappoint some of you, but basically I just lost track of time, and as I've been playing more of the game, honestly I don't feel strongly enough about the game for the review to be very interesting in the first place, but I'll give you some brief thoughts at the end of this video, if you're interested. And so without further ado, let's just straight up dive into the Episode 3 synopsis. Thankfully, this was a bit of a filler episode, so I'm not going to waste too much time on this one. Over half of the plot was just going through the aftermath of the zombie siege and Joel's death. There's a time skip to 3 months later. The town is still rebuilding. Ellie is recovering from her injuries. She talks to the fucking therapist woman one more time, which feels like a complete waste of time. And shortly afterward, Ellie and Dina agree that they need to avenge Joel. But of course, they want backup from the Communist Council, so they start petitioning people to see if they're interested. Meanwhile, all the way in Seattle, we are introduced to the Seraphites, or the Scars. Basically a bunch of religious extremists that are supposed to represent Palestinians, according to Neil Druckmann himself. Except they worship a female version of Muhammad, of course. So we learn a little bit about their culture, about their religion, their whistling communication system, and they have to take cover as the Wolves are coming. The paramilitary group that took over this area after defeating Fedra, which you might remember that Abby and her crew belong to this group. Now back to Jackson, there is a major difference between the game and the TV show here. Namely that in the video game, Tommy actually leaves on his own to head to Seattle after Ellie browbeats him in an earlier conversation saying that Joel would do the same for him. No, in the show version, Tommy actually stays behind. I'm so glad that the TV version of Tommy is such a complete pussy, he wouldn't even avenge his own brother. Even if he does end up showing up later. Come on, man, this is clearly just to glorify the 2 lesbian heroes. I don't know how this show is managing to make the story of The Last of Us 2 worse, but it's finding a way. Instead, there's this huge communist city council meeting where Ellie and Dina put forward a proposal to get 16 men to help them go get revenge. Multiple people come forward giving their arguments. Surprisingly, Seth, the homophobic guy, actually gives an extremely goddamn based speech where everything he says is 100% correct. I'm just gonna play this clip here.
What the hell are we all talking about here? Boo-hoo, it's not fair. What, we gotta forgive everybody when they show up and piss in our eye? They came into our house. They took one of ours. My God, somebody shoots your brother. You want to take the locks off your doors? Grow up! You idiots. They'll come back. They'll come back because we didn't make them pay. And when they come back, they'll be laughing. And you'll all deserve it. Bunch of goddamn victims.
I honestly couldn't believe this made it into the show. I don't know if this is meant to make fun of right-wing people or something, but everything he said was true. And then afterward, Ellie gives her own speech, which is much more boring and pathetic. And ultimately, the council votes against the proposal because they're a bunch of weak cucks. And so, Ellie and Dina just sneak out and head for Seattle themselves. Then there's another filler scene with the therapist and Tommy, and they're fucking watching kids play baseball. I swear, this apocalypse is so inconsistent and jarring, man. They've pretty much just brought civilization back. What the hell is even the point of the zombies? And all they do is discuss, oh man, Ellie's lying because Joel never told anybody that he killed all the Fireflies. Not even his own brother, I guess. Then we get a scene that's supposed to be Seth finally making up with Ellie as he catches up to them as they're sneaking out of Jackson. and he actually trades rifles with her, which I know is supposed to be like a gesture of goodwill, but do we even know if they're chambered in the same round? I know this is nitpicking, but to me it just shows the writers didn't think this scene through at all. Then we get a brief scene where Ellie visits Joel's grave. Then Ellie and Dina are riding through the wilderness, and they're just naming their favorite music artists that start with each letter, and they're naming really dated ones even for when this apocalypse takes place. I mean, are you telling me a couple of like 19-year-olds are gonna be talking about Fleetwood Mac or Frank Zappa when the apocalypse happened in 2014 in the show version? Again, a nitpick, but a little strange. There's nothing wrong with listening to old music. I mean, I do, but it feels like forced chemistry, and there's a hell of a lot of that in this episode and the next. Then at night, we get a scene where the two of them are sharing a tent and they talk about the New Year's kiss. And goddamn, dude, this is so fucking cringe. Ellie rates the kiss a 6. This ugly-ass goblin creature, who's way uglier than Small Schnoz, gives her a fucking 6. Unreal, dude. I know it's supposed to be cute. It's not cute. It's repulsive. It makes her look egotistical. And then for the final scene of the episode, they come across the Seraphites they showed us earlier, who are all slaughtered by the wolves, including the small child. I mean, I don't have to keep saying Israel versus Palestine. Again, Druckmann himself literally said that's what this war represents in the game, which is ironic because Druckmann is Israeli, so he is depicting Israel as equally as bad, at least for what it's worth. But this is supposed to be a post-apocalypse, man. I'm really tired of the incredibly generic message that men are the real monsters, right? Not the zombies. The zombies are just a glorified plot device. No, humans are evil, and they do bad things to each other. That's not a surprise to anybody. That's not deep, that's not profound, it's boring. And the episode ends with Ellie and Dina finally reaching the Seattle outskirts. Ellie says an incredibly lame, like 80s movie line.
Because there aren't that many wolves.
There's about to be a whole lot less.
And we're given a small demonstration of how many wolves there are, showing the insurmountable odds that Ellie and Dina somehow have to overcome. And that's pretty much it for episode 3. I'd give it like a 4. It was mostly just boring. I wouldn't say anything too heinous happens, but certainly not worth anybody's time. Now, episode 4 is when shit starts to get stupid, or at least dumber than last time, because you're gonna begin to realize how ridiculous it is that Ellie and Dina, who both, you know, they look like fucking 15-year-olds, even if they're in their 20s in real life, are supposed to defeat zombie hordes and paramilitary groups and psychotic cultists who are experts at stealth. This shit destroys your immersion like a split second. Now, to get into the actual episode, it begins with a flashback to 11 years ago, when Fedra still occupied Seattle. Now, in case you forgot what the group Fedra is, essentially, when the outbreak started in the US, there's this government organization called Fedra that stands for the Federal Disaster Response Agency, and somehow they took over the government. I guess it'd be the equivalent of if the US military just took shit over. And so they established martial law, created these quarantine zones, right? There was a quarantine zone that fell apart in the first game. And so in this scene, we see a bunch of evil white men, and I guess one Middle Eastern dude, and the driver is Asian, not that he's important to the scene. Mostly you're just gonna notice it's a bunch of white guys being bad people. As they establish, they call the citizens voters, which is an ironic name because they took away their right to vote. No shit, it's martial law in a post-apocalypse. Why the fuck would people have voting rights? But anyway, the guy who's explaining this is Isaac, who you might know is the leader of the wolves in the present. And so you can see where this is going. He ends up betraying Fedra, throwing a grenade in the truck, and the one white guy who survives decides to join the resistance, the wolves, as they become. And so I have to point out the obvious here. The good guy who defeated the evil fascist military group is black, and the leader of the resistance is a woman. Do you think maybe those were intentional choices, possibly? And speaking of propaganda, in the present, we see Ellie and Dina start to explore Seattle. They encounter some pride flags and some rainbow graffiti. The irony here being that they have no idea what Pride Month is, despite being two lesbians, as, well, yeah, I obviously wouldn't exist anymore in the apocalypse. Now, maybe you would expect me to complain about this scene somehow, but this is fucking Seattle, so I'm not surprised by all the gay shit. Anyway, Ellie ends up crawling on top of a tank, making a shit ton of noise. Nothing happens. Dina spots a radio station on the horizon that the wolves have taken over, and they plan to just straight up assault that thing. Dina points out the obvious that this is probably a suicide mission, but let's be real, these bitches have Batman-level plot armor, so they'd probably be fine. Then we get a very annoying filler scene that's supposed to be romantic, where Ellie plays Take On Me on a guitar that she finds in this music store. And I fucking love that song, easily top 5 80s songs. And hearing her butcher that shit just kind of pissed me off. Dina sheds a tear as if this shit is beautiful. God, this romance is so fucking forced! Anyway, meanwhile, we get to Isaac again, and he's given this huge speech about he always wanted to own this fancy set of pot and pans because he would impress girls by cooking for them. Of course, the twist of the scene being he's torturing a naked Seraphite. Literally, his dick is fucking hanging out, and they just show it on screen. So we get to watch a black guy torture a white guy, and yeah, I'm just gonna lay it out like that. I mean, you can add whatever context you'd like to make that sound better, but that's exactly what happens. Then, of course, there's even more thinly veiled commentary as the Scar accuses Isaac of killing their children, and Isaac defends it by saying, well, they trained the children to attack the wolves. You know, maybe remind you of anything, maybe of children in the Middle East having bombs. This shit is so surface level and obvious, it feels like it was written by like a 16-year-old girl. Back to Ellie and Dina, they find out that the radio station has already been attacked. The Scars somehow managed to kill all the wolves and hanged their bodies, having their fucking guts spilling out. Again, both sides bad. I can't even show this on screen because this will probably get age restricted. But yeah, it's just kind of more senseless violence. If it was in a cooler setting and cooler context, it might have been a good scene, but this is The Last of Us 2 we're talking about. Just assume everything you're seeing is propaganda, especially when Neil Druckmann basically admits that it's propaganda. Now, of course, our heroes have monumentally bad luck as reinforcements from the wolves show up, and Ellie and Dina have to try and sneak past them. Of course, Ellie is forced to try and stealth kill a guy, and holy shit, a 90-pound woman somehow jumps a guy from the front, gets behind him, starts choking him out, and look at this, doesn't even look like she's strangling him or even holding him effectively in any way. Another guy comes up who Dina sneaks behind, shoots him in the head. And then Ellie somehow still manages to hold this guy on the ground for another several seconds and then stabs him in the throat. Holy shit, is the whole show gonna be like this? Who the hell can watch this shit and not laugh out loud? Anyway, Ellie and Dina manage to escape into a transit tunnel, and one of the flares that the wolves put down is touching one of the cordyceps fungus little stalks, which, as we know already, means the entire horde is coming. And so we end up getting a really cringy, prolonged chase scene where a couple of teenage girls somehow manage to escape a massive zombie horde. It's honestly not really worth going into detail on this. It just kind of looks dumb, man. I know it's supposed to be intense because, like, there's all these zombies crowding around the fucking subway car, but you know neither one of them is gonna die, or at least I do. No, all of this is just a huge setup for Ellie to get bitten so that she can prove to Dina that she's immune. And so they escape into the nearby theater, which ends up being their base of operations later, at least in the game. And we get what's supposed to be an intense scene as Ellie has to try to convince Dina not to shoot her. But again, stuff like this doesn't work when you already know what's going to happen. Ellie is the main character. She's not going to die. And Dina is a pregnant Jewish woman, so she's not going to die either. But I will say the next part of the scene, to give, you know, a small little compliment toward the show, actually has good lighting, as Dina and Ellie agree to sit across from each other, with Dina having the gun ready for whenever Ellie starts to turn. And her flashlight is framed in such a way that we can't see her face as Ellie tries to convince her that the infection is not taking hold. Now, of course, this is ruined immediately afterward, as instead of Dina being relieved that Ellie is immune to the virus, she says,
I'm pregnant.
and then we get our fucking lesbian love scene. Oh my god. Dude, it's so bad, man. This is fucking gross. Make it stop. And somehow the morning after scene is even more cringy, as Dina gives her story about how she was always bisexual, but her mother told her no, she only likes boys. And Ellie gives her story about how she burned herself to hide her original zombie bite scar. I don't know, this shit doesn't add anything to the show. They also talk about how Dina has confirmed multiple times that she's pregnant. So we have a fucking pregnant woman fighting in the post-apocalypse. And we get a confirmation that yes, it is in fact Jesse, the Asian cuck's kid. And Ellie says she's going to be a dad. You know what? I've changed my mind. Maybe Jesse isn't the cuck, Ellie is, because she's gonna raise another man's child. And the episode ends with Ellie and Dina heading to the rooftop and spying in the distance that the Seraphites and the wolves are now in open conflict in the streets. And of course, the destination they need to head to is directly in that direction. Now, rating this episode out of 10 is actually difficult because I feel like if you factor in like the ironic enjoyment, like the so bad it's good factor, it's probably between like a 6 and a 7. But if I'm just kind of trying to objectively rate how bad this is, I'd say it's another 4, where the stupidity is too damn high, but at least some interesting things were happening. You know, the zombie chase, if it was with better characters, could have been entertaining. It's just everything else surrounding this is so lame and literally gay. And of course, there's the whole propaganda factor with what the scars and the wolves represent. And yeah, this show is just getting unwatchable. Watching these tiny teenage girls take out grown men and countless zombies is incredibly immersion breaking. So yeah, no surprise that the show continues to suck. Now, to give you some brief thoughts on Expedition 33, you may be wondering why I'm not reviewing this. The simple answer is that I ended up losing about 3 days worth of free time that I could have used to play more of the game because my dad came to visit for his birthday. And so by the time I was able to just sit down and play this again, honestly, I just figured it would take too long to give you the proper review that it deserves. And I ended up streaming several times and playing other unrelated games like Doll's Nest. But I figured I owe you at least a little bit. Now, even though it's been like over a week since it came out, I've only just finished Act 1, so about 8 hours into the game. But I have been spoiled on some other things later on, just kind of unavoidable when you use the internet. But I'm not going to talk about spoilers here because I don't think it's that important, even though something very significant happens at the end of Act 1 that's probably going to upset some people. For me, it wasn't that big of a deal, I'll put it at that. So I'll just keep this mini review very simple. I'll just go through the positives and the negatives. The positives are definitely, 1, the combat. This is some of the best JRPG combat I've experienced in a long time. The dodge and parry system really adds a lot of value to this system. You actually feel like you're getting better at the game as you memorize the enemy movesets. And when you perfect parry every one of their attacks and get that huge fucking damage on the riposte, it feels so goddamn good. Now, the downside of this is that the combat really isn't very complex. I mean, once you understand how each character works and their basic synergies, you're probably going to do the same thing every time. And there are some external factors that might change how you play, like elemental weaknesses. And you can shoot weak spots on enemies. Really, ultimately, it's pretty simple. At least each character has a defined role and usually a unique mechanic. So it's not as simple as, oh, I spam the attack button a million times like a lot of old JRPGs are. But it does have the problem that you're basically doing the same combos over and over again. Like Electrify into Crustal Crush, which does an absolute insane amount of damage. Or making Mael go into the Virtuose stance and then using Pierce. I think you get the idea. As for other things I liked about the game, I think the characters are pretty good. By modern game standards, all the female characters are likable at the very least. Now, of course, 2 of them are lesbians, which of course they reveal at possibly the worst moment, I would say. They definitely should have saved that for later. It felt like a little bit of tonal whiplash. But I would say generally the character writing is pretty good. I found Gustav to be a bit annoying at times, but I think I like the other 3 party members just fine. The visuals are a very strong point to the game, but as a lot of other people have pointed out, Unreal Engine 5 realistic character models definitely clash against the high fantasy setting. I know that it's supposed to be like a mix between reality and fiction because it's like real life 19th century Paris clashing with this whole reality distortion shit. But it still just looks a little weird, kind of uncanny. But outside of the characters themselves, the game looks really good. That's pretty much it for the positives. Let's get to the negatives. I think the most obvious one for me is the pacing. Half of this fucking game is cutscenes, it feels like. I don't know if maybe that slows down in Act 2, but I will say Act 1, yeah. So much of the game is either watching cutscenes or walking in a straight line. And yeah, that's another big negative is the level design. This is a hallway game, much like Final Fantasy X or 13. You're basically just walking in straight lines. And yes, there's a few diverting paths with optional items, but for the most part, it's a fucking straight line. And yeah, there's an overworld map and there's optional levels, so that's cool. But the level design is definitely one of the weaker elements for sure. And then I'd say the final negative would just be the DEI element. This is something anybody who played the beginning of the game noticed pretty much immediately, despite, again, taking place in like the late 19th century or something. Paris is incredibly fucking diverse. Like a third of the NPCs are Africans, it seems like, which is definitely not historically accurate. There's also quite a few gay characters, including 2 party members, like I said. And people are just conveniently ignoring this shit because the game is good. I'm not going to tackle the whole, oh, well, if it's successful, it's not woke, just like Baldur's Gate 3, because that's ridiculous. It just means you don't know what woke actually means. No, this is propaganda, plain and simple. It's on the lower level for sure, but much like Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, that's exactly how they get away with it. And yeah, I don't know, just based on the 8 hours I played, it's definitely a good game. Not a masterpiece by any stretch, but there's a lot of people thirsty for a good turn-based RPG, and it's a good game, I'm not gonna lie to you. But it is somewhat flawed in certain ways. Yes, those flaws are subjective. There's a lot of people who don't care if a game has a million cutscenes. I far prefer having text conversations to cutscenes, but given that there's so few friendly NPCs in this game, I guess it kind of makes sense that they went the route they did. But I guess you could say that's a little nitpick, as I would prefer if the world was more alive. I mean, I guess there was the Gestural Village, but those little paintbrush dudes didn't really have anything of value to say anyway. So yeah, would I recommend it? Maybe on sale, but again, those of you who are sensitive to the wokeness stuff are probably going to be annoyed. Like I said, it's a Baldur's Gate 3 situation, though as far as I can tell, less woke or less gay or whatever than Baldur's Gate 3 for sure. And I wouldn't even necessarily say it really scratches the JRPG itch if you have one of those, because this is distinctly French, not Japanese. And like I said, it doesn't have like that immersive world aspect where you're talking to all these people and all these different villages and shit. No, not really. It's kind of more like a cross between a turn-based RPG and a movie game. But I did enjoy those 8 hours, and I will continue to play the game in my free time. So I guess that's about it. I'll see you next time, guys.